Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, I have Juno with me, and today we are starting a video that will probably take me a little bit longer to film, because I have decided to take you along with me while I make a magical oil. So this video will probably be a little bit more vlog style, with also talking head inserts in between to explain stuff. I have decided to make this video because I used to make a lot of magical oils, and I used to even sell them in my shop back when I still had it. And a lot of people were asking me to make a video on magical oils, how to make them, how to enchant them. So I thought it could be fun to just show you how I exactly do it. This will of course not be how everybody makes their oils, so this is just specifically my process of how I do it. But I will take you along from planning to foraging the herbs to making the oil, enchanting the oil, and then using the oil. So basically all of the stages of making and using magical oils. The first stage is making a plan. I am assuming if you want to make an oil, a magical oil, that you already have some kind of plan. So you probably already know what you want that oil to do, right? So that is usually what you start with, the intention. What is it that you even want the oil to do? Do you want it to calm you down? Do you want it to help you get into a meditative state? Do you want it to be used for banishing? Do you want it to be used as an offering to spirits and deities? There is so much you can do with magical oils. I think the possibilities are endless. I actually think they are endless. So there is a lot you can play around with. But in the beginning, I would probably say do something smaller, maybe something that you can actually use daily, maybe even topically if you want to do it like that, so that you kind of get used to using them. But of course, the planning stage is more than just thinking about what you want the oil to do. So this also encapsulates things like, do you want to work with any specific timing? Do you want to forage the plants during specific times, or on in specific places, for example? If you want further information on that, then you can check out this video up here about leveling up your foraging game, because the magic starts with foraging the plants and the dirts and the stones and the bones. Anything you get outside, the magic starts there already. So if you want to bring that into the process, then check out that video. So you could bring timings, for example, into multiple stages. You can forage the plants, of course, during specific times. You can dry them for a specific amount of time. You can make the oil on a specific day or during a specific planetary hour. Whatever days of power or times of power are used in your tradition. So you can get very personal with this. Of course, you also have to think about what you even want to use in the oil. Do you want to only use herbs? That's what I usually do. Or do you want to also use things like, I don't know, bones, crystals, stones? If you use something other than herbs, like stones and crystals and bones and maybe little figurines, or really whatever you want to put into it, coins if it's a money oil, you just really have to keep in mind to clean the things thoroughly first. And I would say if you are using anything like that, that could potentially be not necessarily too sanitary, then do not ingest those oils, never. If you want to make an oil only with herbs, then they're usually, depending on the herbs of course and the oil, usually they are safe to ingest. But if you use something like stones that you found outside, or bones, for example, or anything that could have been touched by someone who was ill or whatever, and you can't thoroughly cleanse and clean, physically clean the objects, then never ingest those oils. But you have to think about that before you start. Often for a lot of people, there's also the question of, how do I even choose which ingredients to use? How do I choose which plants to use, or which crystals, for example? I just go by correspondences. So for example, planetary correspondences, colors, the associations the name has. So a lot of the times, for example, a plant has a specific folkloric name, which gives you an idea of how this plant was used in folk medicine. So any folk medical applications, you can also work with those, or you can work with actual medical use now. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be just magical. You can also look at how these plants are used nowadays in medicine. I think I actually have a video on all of those plant correspondences. If I have it, I think I have it, then I will link it up here. But yeah, I usually think about all of those things. For crystals, of course, there's usually just a list of correspondences that people use for specific crystals, but you can also just go off of color. That's how in the olden days crystals were usually used. They were just looked at and people thought, oh, rose quartz, it's pink. Pink, I connect pink with love, so I use it for love. That's how people usually went about finding out the correspondence of a crystal. But you might have other correspondences for specific crystals. Just choose ingredients, and it doesn't have to be herbs and crystals. Choose ingredients that have the right correspondence for what you want your intention to be. If your intention is a little bit more complicated, then you can also think about what the main intention is and then what maybe some side intentions are. So if your main intention is calm, you want the oil to calm you down, but you also want it to give you a little bit of joy, then maybe make the main ingredient chamomile, but then add a little bit of dandelion too. So you can also play with how big the parts are of the ingredients that you use. Of course, how you will use the oil is also something you should think about before actually making it. Because, for example, if you want to use it topically, so directly on the skin, which is something I really like to do, then of course you have to think about which oil works well and which oil probably also smells good, because I, for example, hate the smell of olive oil. I know a lot of people love to make oils with olive oil as the base oil. I personally hate the smell of olive oil, and if I want to use it topically, I will not use olive oil because I think it stinks. So I, for example, really like almond oil. But almond oil has a shorter shelf life. Think about what you actually want to do with it, and from there you also have to think about which ingredients. So if you want to ingest it, which I usually do not do with my oils, but if you want to ingest it, then of course don't use any toxic ingredients. And also research how long the shelf life is for different oils. Different oils spoil after different amounts of time. Olive oil holds up pretty long, but almond oil usually doesn't really last that long. So if you want it to really stay well and fresh, you should probably use an oil that holds up longer. I must say though, I personally always store my oils in these little brown dropper bottles so that not a lot of sunlight gets onto it. And then also I store them in a shadowy, cool place. And that helps them hold up longer. So even though I do use almond oil, and usually people say almond oil has a shelf life of maybe half a year, I'm using my oils longer because I'm not ingesting them, and they don't rot or anything. I wouldn't ingest them, but I don't do that either way, so that doesn't really matter. I have used oils for maybe 1.5 years, even though they are almond oils. So if you store them correctly in a dark place, dry of course, away from direct sunlight, in a cool shadowy place, and definitely in a brown or like a dark bottle, you can usually use them longer, at least if you don't want to ingest them. Of course, one thing you should think about is, do I have to get the ingredients or do I already have them? Let's say you're going with herbs. Do I already have these 4 herbs that I decided on, or do I have to forage them? And if I have to go foraging, do I want to again do that during a specific time? And if I want to make the oil on a specific day, does it work timing wise? Do I have the time to forage and potentially dry the herbs that I still have to forage? Or is it better to just buy the herbs dried somewhere because the timing just wouldn't work otherwise? I don't have the time to go foraging. So with all of that being said, this is my plan for the oil I'm going to be making in this video. So I want to make an oil for joy. I want to make an oil that makes me happy when I apply it, so that every single day I can use it topically directly on my body to just bring me a little bit of joy and get me into a good mood. Especially when I have maybe a little bit of a downer day, it's rainy outside, I'm usually not as happy when it's rainy or dark outside. And that is why I want to make it on midsummer, because midsummer, in general, summertime is the time when I am the happiest and the most motivated, when I have the most energy. So of course, midsummer is the perfect time to make an oil like that. For me personally. For you, this might look different. Also, midsummer in general is a great time for any magical work. If you are a trolldom practitioner, then you know midsummer is prime time for any magical work. So that works out great for me. And then also talking about timing, I want to go foraging for plants on a Sunday because the sun brings joy for me personally. That's a personal correspondence I have with the sun, is that it makes me happy. Whenever the sun comes out, I am happy. So I want to go foraging on a Sunday for the plants that I still need. I do have a lot that I could use, but I would like to go foraging for some. When it comes to the ingredients, again, I am a person who really only uses herbs in the oils because I just want to make sure that they don't spoil, and I want to make sure that I don't have a weird reaction to the oil that I'm making. So I am only going to be using plants in the oil. And I want to use, again, a lot of solar plants and yeah, plants that are yellow or orange. Those are the colors that I personally connect with joy and happiness and everything like that. Very like citrusy colors. So plant-wise, I of course have to think about what is growing and blooming at the moment, because I want to use a lot of flowers, because I also connect flowers with happiness, and a lot of those flowers look like the sun. And I want to use a lot of solar correspondences, as you have probably noticed. So what's growing at the moment right here is hawkweed, and hawkweed looks a lot like dandelion. It's a little tricky look-alike, so I will use that. What's also growing at the moment is chamomile, and I really also like that as a plant for joy. Daisies are also everywhere right now, so I will definitely use those. And then I have one ingredient that is a very, very personal ingredient that is probably very strange to some people, because I want to use wild grasses in the oil. That is also, again, a very, very personal correspondence. I think like dandelion, hawkweed, daisies, all of those flowers like that, connecting them with joy, that's kind of basic. For me, again, the time I'm usually the most happy and the most energetic is during summer, especially during June. And June and July, like those height of summer months, during those months, there are a lot of wild grasses growing around here, and I think they are so pretty, and I connect them so deeply with that height of summer that makes me so happy, that those grasses make me very happy. So I thought, why not use those wild grasses in the oil? You don't have to look at a correspondence book to pick which plants you want to use for an oil or for whatever really. You can get very, very creative, very personal with it. And yeah, that is my plan. I haven't planned anything for the enchantment later on, because I think I don't really have to plan that right now. I can plan that later on down the road. It's not the first oil I'm enchanting, so it's it's not that big of a deal. I kind of have a rough plan of what I will probably be going to do. I'm doing basically the same thing for every single oil I enchant, but we will talk about that later. I will probably see you later for going foraging for plants. Oh, and most probably once this video is out, I already have a video out about foraging etiquette, both physically and spiritually. So if you're interested in that when you go foraging for the plants for the oil, then check it out here. Now let's get to the next stage, which is foraging. It has been a longer time than I had originally planned. I wanted to originally forage the plants for this oil last Sunday, because Sunday, as I already explained, but that didn't work out because the weather didn't allow me to forage. It was very, very rainy all throughout, I don't know, a week or so. And if you know anything about foraging, then you know that foraging when it's raining or when it's wet in general is not the best idea, because the plants that you forage, they could mold or they could get mildew, a lot of stuff like that that you do not want when you're foraging. So it's always best to forage when it's dry out. Sometimes things just don't work out the way you want to. Last Sunday it was raining, and this Sunday it is probably going to be raining too. So that's why I decided, all right, you know what? It's Friday. Yesterday was very dry. Today is very dry. So we are going to be foraging today. I think a Friday for joy also makes sense with Venus being about pleasure and things like that. So I thought a Friday is also a good idea. I have all of my tools right here, a nice little basket for the stuff I'm going to be foraging. I have my incense plant that I'm going to be giving as an offering to the local spirit. I have my cutting tools, of course. So I have everything prepared. I'm going to be showing you what I'm going to be foraging, and I will show you the offering that I'm giving. Not very fancy, but you don't have to be fancy about it. So let's get foraging. I think that was quite successful. I will show you what I ended up actually getting in a bit. I will maybe go after this and forage outside of my garden, but I don't really want to film there right now, so I will do that later. This is what we got. Here we have a lot of dog rose. This is not necessarily for the oil, but I thought on a Friday I really wanted to harvest some of the native rose that we have growing in our yard. Then here we have the greater celandine, some hawkweed. It is looking a little bit sad, I must admit, but well, maybe I will get some more outside of my garden. Then we have a lot of daisies. Perfect, we have a lot of those here. And then we have a lot of elder, also not for the oil, but I still wanted it. And down here, actually, we have some buttercups, not a lot, but some of them. Alright, it has been a couple of days, it has been over a week actually, and today is midsummer, so happy midsummer. Today we are going into the actual making and enchanting of the oil stage, and I have to gather my supplies, but I thought I would go into some questions that I got about oils. While I do so, first of all, the most asked question that I got was, how do I get my oil to have a longer shelf life, and how do I prevent mold? The first thing that I would say about this is try to use, or not try, just use dried herb matter instead of fresh. Using fresh herbs means that you are also introducing a lot of water into the mixture, and that can lead to mold if anything goes wrong. So dried over fresh plants for sure. Then of course, when it comes to shelf life, the type of oil you use is of course important. A lot of people like to use, for example, almond oil, because almond oil has a longer shelf life than, for example, almond. I personally really like to use almond oil because it's very, very nice on the skin and it smells, in my opinion, much better than olive oil, especially if you combine it with florals and things. Olive oil, I'm not the biggest fan of the smell, so that's why I don't use it. But olive oil does have a longer shelf life. Almond oil has a shelf life of maybe half a year to a year, which in my opinion is a long time. And if you make the oil right, then it can even be longer than that. I mean, if you don't want to consume it, then it's not that big of a deal. That's why I use almond oil all the time. Then, of course, there is jojoba oil. I don't know if that's what it's actually pronounced as, but I think it's jojoba. That has a very, very long shelf life. So if you want something that basically holds up until eternity, then jojoba will be your best friend. But just research different kinds of oils and their shelf lives. That you can easily Google that and just, I guess, take the one that works for you. Almond oil for me works pretty well. It has never gone bad or anything like that. So I'm completely fine with almond oil, but yeah. As I said, a lot of people use almond oil because it has a longer shelf life. One more thing is, I personally remove the plant matter before I bottle the oil. So there are a lot of people who leave the plant matter in the oil, and that is fine at least as long as the plant matter stays in the oil. But once the oil is like halfway empty and there is plant matter that's peeking out of the oil, that can lead to mold. So that's why I personally just play it safe and I completely take out all of the plant matter and I actually filter the oil. But you will see that when we get to the filtering and bottling stage of the oil making process. So that's also something that you can do to make sure that it won't go bad. Something we will also talk about later is where to store the oil. And I actually heard that you can add vitamin E to extend the shelf life. I have never tried that, but I Googled and I found that. So maybe you can do that. But apart from that, honestly, at least my oils don't tend to really go bad that quickly. So if you're working very cleanly when you're making the oil, you are straining everything, you're filtering the oil afterwards, and you're storing it correctly, then you should be fine. Especially if you use olive oil or jojoba oil, then you don't really have to worry that much about shelf life, especially if you're not consuming it either way. Oh, and then I got a lot of questions about which plants you should use, which plants are safe to use on the skin, which plants are safe to be consumed, which plants are pet safe, etc. It wouldn't really make sense for me to go through all of the oils that there are, so I will not go into that. I already mentioned that there are plants that can irritate the skin, there are plants that you shouldn't consume. Before you make an oil, just research whatever plants you want to use. For example, I was thinking about greater calendine in my oil until I realized, oh, it's actually toxic, at least to ingest. So I could have probably used it because I don't ingest my oils, but I wanted to keep it safe. So I decided not to use greater calendine. So while you are assembling a list of plants to use, just research them. You should do that always. Oh, I also got the question on which oils to use in general, not just about shelf life, but in general. Oils are made from plants. So you can research the correspondences of those plants just like you can with the plants that you use as ingredients. So, for example, what correspondences do you think almond has? And does almond fit with the intention of the oil? Or which correspondences do you think walnut has? If you make a protective oil, maybe walnut would be a great idea because walnut is very protective. So you can think of the correspondences of the base oil that you use just like you can when you're selecting the ingredients that you want to use in the oil. Oh, and then I got one last question, and that was how you get the oils to smell good. Honestly, it's just about the ingredients and the oil you use, at least in my experience. That is why I use almond oil, because I think olive oil kind of stinks. I really like the smell of almond oil because it's kind of neutral and it works pretty well, especially with flowery smells or mints and things like that. I think those smells don't really work with olive oil. I don't really think they work well together. So that's why I use almond oil, for example. And to get it to smell better, of course, you just have to use ingredients that smell good. and ideally ingredients that include a lot of essential oils. So for example, a lot of florals, or mint, for example, also has a lot of essential oils. If you use, for example, a lot of roots and barks and stuff like that, those will be much harder to infuse smell-wise, and they also tend to not smell as good. So just research how much essential oil is in the ingredients that you use. If you're using a lot of flowers and stuff, you're probably good to go. And I've also made a lot of good experiences with like citrus barks, so lemon peels, not barks, lemon peel, orange peel, things like that. And some herbs are very, very aromatic. So the more aromatic the herbs are, the more they will usually also infuse your oil. But now let's get into the making of the oil and the enchanting of the oil. Okay, now let us make the oil. I hope that everything works here camera-wise, because I have to work with two cameras, one for my face, because I'm working with the back to the camera, and then one to film what I'm doing with my hands. So I hope this works. Okay, I have the dried plants here. These I also harvested, you saw me, but I'm not using those. I am using these, which is hawkweed and daisies and a little bit of buttercups. I initially planned on also getting some wild chamomile and some wild grasses, but I didn't end up having the time to forage for those. So I'm just using some dried chamomile that I still have from the shop. But that's fine. We don't necessarily have to forage for everything. We just use what we have. What I'm also using is just a random jar, airtight, very important. And also oil. As I said, I am using almond oil, simply because I like it, and this far I have never had a problem with the shelf life. So that is what I'm using to make the oil. Not very special. There's not really anything special to it. But remember, the magic is in the entire process, not just the enchantment stage. So something I recently made, maybe you saw it in my vlog, was this little bowl that I am using to kind of awaken plant spirits when I'm working with dried plant matter. In my opinion, the plants that I gathered myself, they would still be fine. I think there's still a lot of juice in them because they have just been dried for a little bit over a week. But the chamomile that I am working with has probably been dead for a long time. So that is why I'm using my handy dandy awakening bowl, basically. And what I'm doing is the same thing that I usually do with plants when I want to awaken their spirits, is working with my own breath and then basically telling them to wake up. But this bowl is supposed to strengthen that a little bit. So what we're going to be doing first is we are going to add the herbs to this bowl. So I'm starting with the daisies right now. I'm doing that one herb after another. So I'm starting with the daisies, and I'm going to call on the spirit of the daisy plant and telling it to awaken. So what I just did was basically I gathered up energy in my core and I added this life energy, as well as just telling the plants to awaken. Basically, I awakened the plant spirits, and I infused all of those dried plants with my life energy by using basically my energy that I gathered in my core and transferred it into the plants with my breath, told them to wake up, and then called on the spirit of the daisy plant to help me with the oil. And now I'm adding it to the oil. I'm always starting with the plants so that I know how much oil I need in the end. And I'm doing now the same thing with the hawkweed. And now, again, I'm doing the same thing with the buttercups. So you see, it's not that difficult. And now I'm adding it to my glass. I just realized it's just very tiny small, but I mean, I only want a small amount of oil. I'm not making it for the shop anymore. I have to get used to that. I used to make huge batches, so now I am using the chamomile. The good thing is I have a lot of chamomile, so I can add just more chamomile to it than the rest of the plants, which is fine, and I will just be able to make a little bit more oil. And I will be also able to infuse the oil a little bit more if I have more of the plant matter. If I use a dried plant like this that has been dead for a long time, it is all the more important to awaken the plant spirit. I will make sure here not to just infuse my own life energy, but also to really visualize and focus on the plants becoming alive again. And I will visualize heavily the chamomile plant growing and blooming and thriving, basically. So I will visualize the plants being alive. All right, and now we're adding the last plants to the jar. Of course, spilling a lot of it. That is important. All right, and now we have a jar of plants. What we are doing now is adding the oil, the base oil. So in my case, it's the almond oil. We are adding the oil. And now a lot of people will ask, how much oil do I add? You add so much oil that all of the plant matter is covered. But in my case, for example, I don't have a lot of herbs in this glass. It's just a little bit of it. So I will not fill the entire jar. I could technically, but the more oil you have on very little plant matter, the less potency the oil will have. It will have a lot of potency of the almond, but not a lot of the juices that are in the plant matter. So therefore, I try to keep balance between having enough oil, because if the plant matter is not covered entirely with the oil, then that can lead to rotting. I don't want that. So I need enough oil to cover all of the plants, but not so much that it's way too much. So I'm just adding enough oil to it. Okay, that looks like it's enough. That should cover all of the plant matter. Now we are closing this off. And yes, it actually is that simple. We're closing this off really well, really tight, and we're giving it a good shake so that everything is nice and oily. All right, and now we have basically our oil. We could technically stop here, but since this is a magical oil and I want to add a little bit more juice to it, we will enchant this. But we will do that in a very, very simple way. So let me show you how I do it, at least in this case, but this works for a lot of different purposes. We are doing something very, very simple for this oil, but you can adjust this to a lot of different cases. So what we are going to be doing is we are taking some kind of heat-safe plate or something. I just have a silver plate right here. I am going to put the oil in the middle because I want to imbue this with a lot of solar energy. Today is midsummer. We have a lot of solar energy going on right now, and I want to really use that. So I could do a lot of things here, and I want to keep it simple. I don't have any symbols, bind runes, sigils that have anything to do with joy, so that's not something that I would do. But if I had a sigil that would fit this, then I would put a sigil on the glass, on the bottom, on the top, or just put it on paper and put it under the glass. But I don't have a sigil for this, so I'm not doing that in this case. What I will be doing is I will be working with the planetary symbol of the sun and fire, because this is a very fiery oil, and the sun, of course, is very fiery. So I'm going to be working with the elemental symbol of the sun and candles. Let's just get some candles. I'm using yellow candles because, of course, we are using solar energy. I just realized that I didn't have my external mic on. I hope it's fine now. But yeah, we are going to be taking candles and we are working with the planetary symbol of the sun here and the planetary number of the sun, which is 6. So what we are doing is we are basically forming the planetary symbol of the sun with the candles and the oil. So we're placing the candles around the oil, all 6 candles. We could also do 5 around and 1 on top, doesn't really matter. For me, the center of the planetary symbol is the oil, so that's fine. So I'm going to place these around here. And I just realized this is maybe a little bit too small. Maybe I should have taken a smaller container or something. Let me figure something out. All right, I think I figured something out. I'm just going to be using 2 of these plates for candles so that I can extend this, because this is a little bit too close. But we are now placing all of the candles around the jar. And it should be at least semi-circular, because if you've ever seen the planetary symbol of the sun, it is a circle with a dot in the middle, with a point in the middle. So that is what we are going for here. And that is why I kind of extended this display. And yeah, fire safety alert here. Don't let your cats or pets or anything get close here, and don't let this burn down without you looking at it, because we don't want this to become a fire hazard. This is not becoming the perfect circle because I fucked up the geometry, but that's fine. I'm not a perfectionist. I know what I'm going for here. Okay. As you see, not a perfect circle. I wanted to go with a circle. It's, I don't know, it's a different geometric symbol, but we will just pretend like this is a circle and this is the dot in the middle. Well, honestly, no, I will change it. I am a little bit of a perfectionist. At least I can rotate these around a little bit, and then we will get closer to a circle at least. If I put this somewhere here and this somewhere there, this will be at least halfway a circle. All right, let me do this again. It's not that serious, guys. As long as there are candles all around it, it's fine. And I am a chaotic practitioner, so you're getting the life experience of that. All right, this is way better. Okay, now we have something that resembles the planetary symbol of the sun. What I'm going to do now is I am going to light all of these candles, and then I am going to both call on the energy of the sun now at midsummer, where it's the strongest. And I will also visualize basically me pulling down the energy of the sun and putting that into this oil and into this working. And then I will just let everything burn down completely. I will not show you how this all burns down because this will take probably an hour or so. But yeah, that is what we're doing. We are infusing all of this with the energy of the sun. You could be a lot more fancy with this. You could add maybe a corresponding dirt around here. You could add herbs around here. You could anoint the candles. If you already have the same oil that you're making here, then you could also add the remainders of that oil onto the candles. You could write a whole incantation for this. You can really do whatever you want, but I am a simple person, so I am going to be going with that. All right, this is now burning down. This will take some time. And yeah, what I basically did is I really visualized the sun. I visualized the joy that I feel when I feel the sunshine on my face, that energy, that motivation, basically every single feeling that I wanted the oil to give me when I use it. And I really envisioned that, really felt it. For me, spellcasting is a lot about the emotion behind it. So I really evoked that emotion in myself. And then I basically poured all of that energy that I pulled from the midsummer sun and poured that into the oil, and also strengthened that with not necessarily an incantation because it's not something that I pre-wrote, but I just said what I wanted the oil to do. So I strengthened the intention both with a visualization, with an emotion, with my energy, with the sun energy, and also with my words. And now we are letting this burn down, and then afterwards I am going to tell you what we are going to be doing with the oil afterwards. All right, the candles burned down. The oil has been enchanted. What we are going to be doing now is very simple. We are storing this container in some dark and cool place. Dark and cool, that's very important, especially because I have it in a clear glass. If I did not have the possibility of putting it anywhere dark, then I would wrap this in paper or something so that it is protected from UV. But yeah, cool and dark place to store. I am keeping it there for about 4 to 6 weeks. I will just test it every now and then. Every couple of days I will open it up and then see how it smells. And once it is sufficiently infused, so once it does actually smell like the flowers that I put in there, then it's done. And of course you can make this a little bit more magical by, for example, saying you are making the oil on a new moon and then you're letting it infuse until the next new moon, or you're making it on a full moon, letting it infuse until the next full moon, or you are letting it infuse for X weeks. For, let's say you are choosing a planetary number or something and then saying, okay, this is for the sun, so I'm letting it infuse 6 weeks. That's, for example, something that I could do with this oil. Maybe I will. We will see. But you don't have to do that. But if you're making a cold infusion like I am doing here, so I'm not like boiling the oil or anything. If you're doing a cold infusion, then it's usually about 4 to 6 weeks. And I just realized I think I haven't even gotten into cold versus hot infusions yet. I just did a cold infusion, or I'm doing a cold infusion, which means I am not processing the oil with any heat. I am just putting the herbs into the oil and then I'm letting that sit for 4 to 6 weeks and giving it a good stir at least every couple of days. Better would be every day, but if you miss a day, that's not a big deal. If you're not using any like delicate herbal material like flowers or mint or basil or anything like that, but you are using more sturdy plant material like bark or roots or anything like that, then you might want to use a hot infusion, which means that instead of just putting the herb material into the oil and letting that sit for a couple of weeks, you're putting it into the oil and then you are boiling it in a double boiler situation. So you're not actually boiling the oil, but you're just making it warm so that the plant material infuses faster. And then you're letting that sit for 30 minutes up until multiple hours, of course stirring it every now and then it's done. So that's of course much quicker, but you can do that with delicate plant material like flowers. And I don't usually use barks or roots that often. So I usually use herbs or flowers, so I usually do a cold infusion. So yeah, this goes into my cupboard because this is cool and dark. This is a perfect space to keep it. I will shake this every couple of days, even better every single day. We will see. I will most probably forget to shake it once in a while. And yes, afterwards, I will see you in a couple of weeks, and then I will show you how I strain it, how I filter it, how I bottle it, and how I use the oil. See you in a couple of weeks. It has been roughly 6 weeks since we've made the oil and it is done. So I usually let them steep for about 6 weeks. Oh. And it smells great. Kind of smells a lot like chamomile, but very... I can't say it in a different way than it kind of smells sunny, so I like that. So what we are going to do now is we are going to filter this. I never let the herbs stay in the oil. So I personally completely filter it. I want it to be entirely free of any herbal matter because the more stuff is in there, the higher the chance of it starting to rot or mold, and we don't want that. So what I'm personally doing is I'm not only putting it through a cheesecloth, but I'm using a paper coffee filter. And for me that really works because it gets filtered really, really well. No herb matter stays in the oil, which I personally really like. So I'm first of all straining the entire thing through the paper filter, just dumping that all in there. And if you do it like this, it will take some time because for oil to run through a paper filter, that just takes some time. So you need to be a little bit patient when you're straining oil like that, but in the end, once you get the oil, it is very, very clean. It's not murky or anything. It's very clean and there's no herb matter in there. The reason why I don't want herb matter in there, and especially not in the bottled oil in the end, is that once the oil is used and there's only herb matter and then only a little bit oil left, that's the moment where it could rot. And also if you use a dropper bottle, which I personally really like because it's very convenient to use a dropper bottle, you're always sucking in a little bit of that herb matter and at some point the dropper will just completely stop working. It will be completely clogged. And I don't want that. So what I'm doing is I'm completely filtering it, leaving no herb matter at all in there. And then we're going to be bottling it in a dark dropper bottle. Oils always have to go in dark bottles to ensure that they don't go bad too quickly, and stored in a dark place if possible. Let's wait until this is filtered and then we can continue. And afterwards I will tell you a little bit about how you can use these oils in your magical practice. All right, now lastly, we need a little dropper bottle. It doesn't have to be a dropper bottle, as long as it's a dark bottle, like a brown bottle, a black bottle, something like that. A small bottle that you can put the oil into, that's enough, but I just like to use dropper bottles because they are convenient. And we have strained the oil. It is very clear, no herb matter in there whatsoever. You can technically take the filter and squeeze it a little bit too, to kind of squeeze out the last bits of oil, but honestly it's pretty well strained. Oop. And then we have oily fingers. And now we're going to just pour it into the bottle. It's really that simple. There's nothing very fancy to it. This actually apparently makes me more than just one. Oh, this doesn't fit. This apparently makes me more than just one bottle. That's nice. So I can actually bottle another one of these. And I would say if you make more oils, then definitely label them, but that's about it. Now you have your finished oil. So with that done, let us talk about how you use these in your magical practice. All right, now we have successfully made a magical oil, we have enchanted it, and it's ready to use. But what do you use them for and how do you do it? So I think the most prominent example in spell work is probably to use it kind of to boost your intention in a spell. So let's say you are casting a financial gain spell and you think about, okay, what do I want to use that's in that spell? I want to use a green candle and I want to work with this and that planet and I want to use or work with this and that moon phase and herbs and crystals and whatever you want to use really. And you will think the same way about oils. So I have 5 different oils. Do I have an oil that kind of fits this kind of purpose? So for example, with a spell for financial gain, what kind of oils would make sense for that purpose? So for example, a road opening oil would make sense here. You can actually just make a money oil and use that. But there are so many different oils. You just have to think about, okay, what really makes sense here in the case of my spell with the intention that I have for this spell work. And then you can use it in the spell in very many ways. Usually, you use an oil to anoint something with it, kind of like you would, for example, with a special water sometimes. You will use an oil to anoint something with it. So a lot of times, at least that's what I see most often online, is anointing candles, for example, with an oil, and then maybe using the oil also to make herbs stick on the candle. You can anoint talismans or amulets with the oil. You can do that either just once while you're enchanting the talisman or the amulet, but you can also use the oil to kind of strengthen the intention of that talisman or that amulet over and over again whenever you feel like it needs a little bit of a boost. So you can use it to add energy to something and intention to something. And there is really no way how you can't use it, apart from I personally wouldn't ingest it, depending on how you made it and with which ingredients. But you can anoint so many different things with it. As I said, candles, you can anoint, for example, bowls with it that you mix herbs in. A protective oil, for example, you can use it directly on doors or on windows, on mirrors. If you use, for example, like a psychic oil or an oil for divinatory purposes, you can use it to anoint your black mirror or maybe the bowl that you use for scrying, or maybe the cup that you use for either tea leaf reading or coffee grounds reading. Basically anything that you can physically use oils on, you can use your magical oils on. That can be just a part of another spell, that can be a magical act in itself. Just add some energy and some intention to it and apply the oil onto something. And this can also apply to yourself. So something that I like to use oils for example, is to kind of strengthen my daily affirmations with them. So if my daily affirmation is, let's say, to film YouTube videos and work, so to make money, for example, then in the morning I could be like, okay, I am working today and I want to make money. I want to make sure that the video that I'm filming, for example, right now makes a lot of money. Then I could use my money oil on myself. I could technically even use it on my camera or something. As long as you don't damage whatever you're using the oil on, it's fine. Something that could actually be also really, really cool is using linseed oil to make a special oil and then anointing something made from wood with it. So let's say you're making an idol for a god or a goddess, or you're making like a spirit house or something from wood. If it's raw wood, you can use an oil, a special oil, whatever oil you want, and kind of oil it with that, like you would also do with furniture. Linseed oil is used a lot in woodworking, so linseed oil would be perfect for that. But yeah, what I wanted to get at is I like to use oils also as boosters for my personal affirmations. So let's say you are going out and you need some protection or something to strengthen your boundaries with people or something, then you could use a protective oil on your body. Again, only do that if you know that the oil is safe to use on your body and that you won't have an allergic reaction to it. Whenever you use an oil on yourself, do a little test with just 1 drop of the oil to see if you have any allergic reaction to it, or if you used something spicy in it, if you react to it in some way that you don't necessarily want. So always, if you want to use the oil on your body, always test it beforehand. That's important. But by using the oils on your body, it can like directly influence what happens in your body and also in your energy body. So I find that very, very handy. It can kind of be used as a liquid talisman or amulet, if you want to see it like that. You can also, for example, use it on a veil. Like if you have a veil and you use it for protective purposes, you can use a protective oil on it. That's also a way to enchant it. So oils are a tool that is insanely versatile. You can use it in so many ways. Oh, something else that I just thought of is using it to consecrate items, for example, to consecrate your altar or any kinds of tools. A protective oil on your altar is great if you don't want anyone to influence it from the outside. There's really a million ways in which you can use magical oils. If you have any further ideas, then put them in the comments, because I know I'm probably not covering every single thing because I'm just a human and I can't think of everything. But with that being said, I hope I covered everything about oils. If you do have any further questions, then put them in the comments. I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned whatever you were seeking to learn about oils in the video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up and ring the bell down below so that you're notified whenever I upload a new video. If you want to keep up to date with my personal shenanigans, then check out my Instagram. And in case you want to support this channel, which of course would be well appreciated, then check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon. And I will see you in another video. Bye!